How are you guys doing? It is Friday, November 13th, 2020. Out here in this quarantine, I'm James Sims. I'm here with my best friend, Luke Truitt, and we're going to get into this Roundtable Sports discussion number one, and we're going to get into the LeBron, Michael Jordan GOAT debate discussion. And I think the way we're going to attack this head on is instead of starting the year that they entered the league, I'm thinking about comparing them side by year, when they were the same age, because I think that that's probably the fairest way of comparing both players at similar stages of their career. LeBron James, following the season, this was his age 35 season. Michael Jordan retired at about 34. So anything LeBron James does past this is basically just going above and beyond. And just we're getting ready to just jump right into this. Luke, you got me on this, right?
Yeah, no, this is an interesting way of looking at it. I'm excited to see what comes of it.
Right. Yeah. So I guess starting on, there's I guess like one way of looking at this is just like there's so many different ways you can really view this argument, and it's just they're two different players. They play two different positions. What do you think separates these two players?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the arguments that we hear are around, offensive prowess, overall impact on your team, success of the individual player versus success of the team. And I think, everybody's got the thing they care about the most. For me personally, I think, it's the value you bring, how good you make your teammates, how good you make the teams that you move to or come on to. And I think that, we'll dive into this, but I think both players have brought a lot to the different franchises that they've played for.
Yeah, and a big part of it is that a lot of people tend to overlook that Jordan did go straight from high school. He did play for UNC under Dean Smith, arguably one of the greatest coaches of all time. Even though the Chicago Bulls were a failing franchise, like they still had one of the best GMs. They had he had one of the greatest head coaches of all time with him, whereas LeBron was kind of moving from like just unorganized franchise to unorganized franchise, and then until he got to the Miami Heat, and then he kind of figured things out. Mm-hmm. And of course, when he leaves, it's a dumpster fire. Whereas Jordan leaves, and they're still in the Eastern Conference Finals. Yeah. So but I think right now, I guess the best way of jumping into this is starting off with their age 17 seasons, which would be LeBron James's junior year of high school and Michael Jordan's senior year of high school.
Yeah.
And whereas Michael Jordan, of course, he went to UNC, so obviously he was an amazing high school basketball player. We all know what happened with I guess he got cut from the JV team his sophomore year, but he went on to be a 5-star player. He was named a McDonald's All-American, had offers from Duke and the like, but he eventually ended up going to UNC. But that's where Michael Jordan was. So where was LeBron James in his age 17 season?
Yeah, so when LeBron was 17, that was his junior year of high school. He was featured on the cover of a couple magazines, Slam most notably, and then Sports Illustrated later on. He was on the All-USA first team, St. Vincent, St. Mary's, led them to some big upsets, lost in their championship game, but then tried to get into the NBA draft as a junior in high school, but they would not let him hop in. And it was also at that time, that he was making a real mark for himself. And he was actually named Mr. Basketball of Ohio, right, as a junior?
Yeah, I think he was named the National Player of the Year as a junior, which is something that no player has ever done. So, this is at this point in his career, but of course, through age 17, LeBron James is unquestionably the better player.
Yeah.
So, just that right then and there. So, jumping to age 18, Michael Jordan, freshman at UNC. That was the year they actually did win the championship. He had the game-winning shot. They beat Georgetown in the national championship game. He had James Worthy under Dean Smith. Yep. He was an amazing young player, but of course he had to stay on UNC because he wanted to develop his skills more. That was where Michael Jordan was, especially at this point of his career. What was LeBron doing when he was age 18?
Well, LeBron was buying Hummers for his mom. He was center of a bit of controversy there, but he was actually ended up being suspended for that, and their team, the Irish, actually lost the only game of the season that year when he was out.
Well, wasn't it due to what was it? They had to forfeit, right? It was something stupid like that, right?
Yeah. They had to forfeit one of the wins that year because of LeBron's suspension. and he ended up scoring 52 points in the championship game of the season that year, and then obviously went on to NBA.
So, I mean, Jordan had to go back. I mean, after his age 18 season, Jordan had to go back to UNC, whereas LeBron was the number one pick in the draft.
Yeah.
In a draft class with Carmelo Anthony and Dwayne Wade, which goes and other players, which goes down as one of the greatest draft classes of all time, and he was number one straight out of high school. And let's not forget how amazing Carmelo Anthony was as a one and done at Syracuse. So at age 18, does LeBron get the edge?
Yeah, I think it's tough. I think the big key here is, Jordan had the college championship. LeBron had a high school championship, not really that close to it, but I don't know. It's really tough.
But one player went number one in the draft. One went back to college. One wasn't ready.
Yeah, I would say at age 18, LeBron's in a better spot than Jordan is after age 18.
Of course. All right. So jumping into his age 19 season in Michael Jordan's second year at UNC, he actually averaged the most points that he'd averaged at UNC.
Yep.
He'd averaged 20 points a game, 5.5 rebounds, 1.6 assists, and of course, after winning the championship, he was named a first team All-American, a consensus first team All-American, first team All-ACC, USA Basketball Male Athlete of the Year. This was the first year he kind of established himself as a UNC great.
Yeah.
But he was doing this against collegiate competition, and I think that year that was probably I don't know if it was 83 or 84, but that was one of the years where NC State won the championship, whereas
Really?
I don't even think UNC was the best team in their own state.
Yeah.
And what was LeBron doing when he was 19 years old?
I mean, that's year, he won Rookie of the Year, went number one overall.
Oh, Rookie of the Year, did you say?
Yes, in the NBA nonetheless. The Cavs weren't great that year. They had a losing record. But they won 18 more games than the year before when they had LeBron and basically nothing else. So
what was their record that year?
So that year they were 35-47 when before that, right?
Okay.
Only 17 wins. So LeBron averaged 25-5 as a rookie. By all accounts looking back, should have probably made the All-Star game. But he did not. And was just a Rookie of the Year only.
Only Rookie of the Year. So, whereas you had one player, of course, one of the ACC's best basketball players ever, but you had one that was the Rookie of the Year in the NBA. Do you think it's a clear edge?
I think at this point, especially with NC State winning the title that year, and Jordan playing well, but not really doing much in college again. Against college competition, I think LeBron gets the edge.
You think it's the edge?
The third year, yeah.
Yeah, so up until age 19, LeBron is clearly the better basketball player. So now, entering their 20s, going into Michael Jordan's final year at UNC, this year he would go on to, after averaging 20 points a game, he would drop to averaging 19.6, but still playing amazingly. He averaged 5.3 rebounds per game, 2.1 assists, 1.6 steals, and over a block per game in 30 games. Michael Jordan, of course, did amazing. He established himself as one of the best young NBA prospects, and I believe he was drafted third overall in what I believe was the 1984 NBA draft. So that's what Michael Jordan was doing in his age 20 season.
And LeBron was he made his first All-Star game that year. Pretty great. That's when he was really coming up. A lot of the league noticed that. Cavs didn't make the playoffs again, but they finally had a winning record, right? So 2 seasons after winning 17 games, they were 42-40.
Yeah.
Which is pretty good. He ended up averaging 27, 7 and 7, with 2.5 steals
in the NBA against NBA competition.
Yes, yep, and he was named to an All NBA team, which was right, pretty dope.
And this is 2003. Kobe and Shaq were still at the top of where they were still at the top of their game.
Kobe and Shaq, right? The Spurs were still kind of big timers, right? This is a long, long time ago.
And this is a second-year NBA player, for the record, right?
For the record.
For the record.
Yes.
So yes. There's no argument, right? One was the third best. One was the third best prospect, or at least that's what I guess there were 2 teams that chose not to pick him.
The NBA decided that the third best player in college was this person, and then arguably one of the best players in the NBA.
Whereas LeBron made what did he make? He made the did he make the All NBA second team that year?
I
believe he made the All NBA second team that year. He established himself as a top 10 player in the NBA, whereas one was the third pick in the 1984 draft. Do you think is there an argument here?
No, I don't think so. Still, again, you laid it out pretty well there.
So yeah, up through age 20, it goes to LeBron.
Yeah.
Jumping into his age 21 season, which was Michael Jordan's rookie season, is probably one of the best rookie seasons in all of NBA history. He would go on to average 28 points per game, 6.5 rebounds, almost 6 assists, 2.4 steals per game, which is amazing. He went on to shoot, 51% from the field, 17% from three. And in the season in 1984-85, the Chicago Bulls would finish with a 38-44 record, finishing 7th in the East. And then they would lose in the first round in 4 games to the Milwaukee Bucks. But Michael Jordan would win the Rookie of the Year. That's what Michael Jordan was doing. He had an amazing individual performance, but of course the Bulls were bounced in the first round. What was LeBron doing?
And so in 2006, LeBron ended up being the All-Star Game MVP. Went for 31, 7 and 7. He lost to Steve Nash as the MVP runner-up. And the Cavs finally made the playoffs, first time in about 6 years or 8 years. And he ended up having a triple-double, beating the Washington Wizards, and made his first game-winning shot of playoffs, which I'm sure we'll talk about a bit more. Clutch in the playoffs and that sort of thing. They ended up beating the Wizards, losing in the second round of the Pistons.
And was this his first team appearance?
And so he made the All NBA first team that year for his first time.
So through age 21,
again, LeBron, I think it's pretty clear at this point, but I think it's gonna get a little more interesting going forward.
It's gonna get a lot more interesting. So going into Michael Jordan's second year, which was 1986, and let's not mention he did make the All-Star game his rookie year. In his second year, this is when Michael Jordan had the leg injury. He only started 7 games, only played 18 of them. If you know from the the Last Dance documentary, he was getting the buckets when he could, but of course but the sheer fact that he played 18 games, you'd have to give this season to LeBron. But please humor me. What did LeBron do in his age 22 season?
Yeah, so LeBron was averaging 27, 7 and 6. 1.5 steals a game, made it to the conference finals against the Pistons, and that's when he kind of went off at the end of that game, scored 29 of the Cavs' last 30 points. This year he was only second team All-NBA. However, he ended up making it to the finals, in which he ended up losing to the Spurs.
Did he lose or did the Cavaliers lose?
Yes, that's a good point. One that some folks like to ignore. But yes, the Cavaliers lost that game, including LeBron. And that performance that got them to that position was due to the crazy sort of atmosphere that LeBron created in the Pistons series. So he ended up not winning the MVP. Oh, he did win the MVP. No, he didn't win the MVP. Never mind.
But this was a 22-year-old who was the best player by far on a team that made it to the Eastern Conference Finals. Let's not mention that they beat the Detroit Pistons, and let's not forget how dominant the Detroit Pistons were in the Eastern Conference Finals in the early to mid 2000s.
Right. Yeah, and I think a big point a lot of people like to make is the level of competition that these folks were playing against, and I'd love to talk about that a little bit more as we get further into this. But I think the Pistons were one of the best franchises that was a lot around at the time, and LeBron was able to kind of dismantle them by himself. Falling short of probably the only other franchise that's better than them at the time, the Spurs.
Yeah, and I mean this is also at a time where Tim Duncan, Kobe Bryant were still probably one of the best players, and I think that was probably the game that he beat the Pistons was probably the game that he asserted himself as the best player in the NBA at 22. So it's like,
and he's back to the first team All-NBA here with LeBron. This is his second time being first team All-NBA at this point. He's already got 2 second team one second team All-NBA at this point. It's very interesting, right? Like, these are very 2 big issues, but I still think at this point LeBron's got the edge, right? You'd have to think that making it to the finals, being first team All-NBA again, you have to give that age 20. What are we at right now? 22.
We're at 22.
Age 22 season, still
Yeah, and even though Michael Jordan did kind of wield he did kind of wield the Bulls into the playoffs that year, but they lost. They ended up getting swept by the Celtics. But that's what happens when I guess you get swept by the Celtics in the first round because you were the 8th seed in the Eastern Conference. So I mean that kind of adds into
losing when your team is so much worse than the team that you're playing.
Yeah,
it's not usually your fault.
It's not usually your fault, but I think a lot of the times like the seeding. If you're 8th seed in the East. Like,
yeah,
even though the team wasn't as good, it's just people tend to overlook that this actually happened. So let's jump into their age 23 seasons, of course, 23. Let's throw that out there. So in his age 23 season, this is where it starts to get interesting. Michael Jordan averaged the most points that he would ever average in an NBA season. He would start all 82 games in the season. He would average 37.1 points per game.
Wow.
This was his first scoring title. He'd also average 5 rebounds, 4.6 assists, 2.9 steals, by the way. He shot 48% from the field, 18% from three. He went on to shoot 85% from the free throw line, and in 1987, he would go on to make his third All-Star game. He would make his first ever first-team All-NBA. And this year, the Chicago Bulls, they would go on to finish 40-42 on the season. They finished 8th in the East, and they get swept by the Boston Celtics for the final time. But this is the 3rd year in a row that he got swept in the first round. This is the year, of course, before Scottie Pippen joined the team.
He got swept the first time?
He didn't get swept. He lost 3-1 the first time, but he'd only won one game in his first 3 playoff appearances. And of course, the last 2 times, getting swept by the Celtics. I mean, it's not easy to play the Celtics in the 80s when you're the only star on the team, and I understand that. It's just a lot of it came down to seeding, and the Bulls just happened to finish 8th. And Michael Jordan he jumped onto the scene as one of the league's best individual talents. And of course, like with the Nike campaign. Do
you know where he finished in the MVP voting that year?
In the MVP voting, I'm not especially sure. Let me check and make sure.
Not on there. Yeah, well, I mean, we can talk about LeBron quick while we're looking at that. So that year, LeBron, this was his one scoring title. He scored 30, averaging 30 a game. He won All-Star MVP again. He ended up he was drafted in 2003. This was the 2007-2008 season, and he passed the Cavs' leading scorer to become the all-time leader in franchise history. And did it in 100 less games than the guy who did it before him, so almost more than a full season of games. And the Cavs ended up being seeded 4th that year, beat the Wizards, so moved on to the second round and ended up losing in 7 games to the eventual champions that year, Boston Celtics, with big 3, KG, Ray Allen, Paul Pierce. And in that last game, it was that duel between Paul Pierce and LeBron, 41-45 respectively, and it was a very interesting game there. So at this point, right, we've got LeBron making it to the second round, pushing the Celtics to 7 games, who ended up actually winning the championship, winning All NBA team yet again. He was scoring champion that year, not averaging 37, but averaging 30.
Where did he finish in MVP voting? Because Jordan finished second. He had 57% of the MVP vote.
Okay. And, still looking at, let me find where LeBron finished that year. But, yeah, he was, definitely. Yeah. So where are you leaning on this? I'm looking for MVP voting.
I think when it comes down to it, these players were so individually close. It's just you can't overlook the fact that considering both of their players or both of the teams outside of Michael Jordan, LeBron James they had the same strength. The teams were probably as good as they were for their eras. I think the fact that LeBron was able to push his team further, and the fact that he lost to the eventual champions later on, and he actually seeded better in the regular season, I would lean it a little towards LeBron, and I would understand why people would give Jordan the tip, and of course he averaged 37 points per game, which is the most he ever averaged in a season. I'd understand if people would give this season to Michael Jordan. I think playoff success matters, especially in this aspect. I would personally give it to LeBron, but it's where do you think it?
I was when you're thinking about 37 points game, it's really tough to go anywhere else. But I think something that I value a lot more, potentially than other folks is sort of, your impact on everybody else and your impact on the game. And I think that 37 points, while that's awesome, if it's only leading you to, first round exit, is not worth quite as much as it might be if you won the final. So I'd have to still go with, again, kind of LeBron's undefeated.
So LeBron, up until age 23, the better basketball player.
The better basketball player, the more accomplished basketball player. Really kind of just like a sweep of all things that are relevant.
All right, so now when we get to age 24, it gets a little interesting. This was Mike's 1987-88 season. As many Michael Jordan fans are aware, this is the year that he won his first MVP, and he won the Defensive Player of the Year, if I'm not mistaken. He also, of course, after winning MVP and Defensive Player of the Year, he was first team All-NBA. And at this point, he had taken the title away from Magic Johnson and Larry Bird as the best individual player. But 1988, I think that was either the Lakers, that might have been the Lakers' last championship before the Pistons started winning. So he was like I said, he was one of the best individual players, and now with Scottie Pippen becoming a better player, the Chicago Bulls were able to get further in the season. They actually finished with 50 wins. They had the best record that they've had since the 70s. They were able to finish third. They beat the Cavaliers in the first round in 5, and they were able to they lost to the Detroit Pistons in the second round. This is the first time they met the Pistons face up, and they just lost the Pistons. I think this is the year that the Pistons lost to the Lakers in the finals.
Got it.
But of course, like I said, in addition to that, Michael Jordan was, I think, the dunk contest champion for the second year in a row. And there's a very solid argument that if you win the MVP and the Defensive Player of the Year, he should hands down be the better player. But if LeBron ended up having the same season, if it comes down to the playoffs, Michael Jordan or the Chicago Bulls, they lost 4-1 to the Detroit Pistons in the Eastern Conference semifinals.
And so this year was, very oddly similar. So LeBron finished second in NBA Defensive Player of the Year, which is something that, maybe isn't really thought of a lot when you think of LeBron, because, it's kind of a big thing. He never won an NBA or Defensive Player of the Year award. That year's Dwight Howard, right? Like Dwight Howard was kind of like in his prime then, big force, and actually ended up beating LeBron in the playoffs that year, but we'll get to that in a second. LeBron also won his first MVP that year, right? So that's, another big plus for them. The Cavs were one game away from the best home record in all of league history at that point. They actually ended up going 66-16 on the season. Their second best player was Mo Williams, if anybody remembers him. And this was, sort of the first time that LeBron, or the first Cavalier that won an MVP award. In the playoffs that year, Cleveland swept the first two teams they played, the Pistons and then the Hawks, right? So the Pistons are kind of winding down on their franchise or their dynasty, and now the Cavaliers are making a little deeper in the playoffs. But then they get to the Eastern Conference Finals against Dwight Howard and the Magic. LeBron goes for 49 points on 66% shooting, and they lose first game of the season. He hits his second game winner of the playoffs of his career up to this point against them. Game 2 ties the series, but the Cleveland Cavaliers end up actually losing that series 4-2. LeBron averages 39, 8, and 8. And averages 35 for the entire playoffs. So LeBron clearly had a better playoffs, I think, that year. I think the main thing, right, is finishing second versus first in Defensive Player of the Year.
Yeah.
So where do you see this falling?
I think a lot of it comes down to, I think their teams were still probably they were probably at the same level. I would probably argue that the Bulls were maybe better, and the Bulls did end up losing to the team that did lose. I guess I'd say that Michael Jordan might have had the better regular season, but of course the season doesn't end at the regular season.
Yeah.
Both players won their first MVPs at 24. This is at least the closest that it's gotten, but one player made it to the Eastern Conference Finals, and I'd personally give this to LeBron because as much as Jordan fans like to say how far did his team get. I'd give this one to LeBron because his team actually made it further at this point in his career.
Yeah, and I think, one thing to note as an aside on all this, one of the big arguments, we'll see on this is, you weren't there, we didn't see Jordan play. We don't know what it felt like to be there. And we understand that. We understand that we aren't able to experience that firsthand. However, this is a purely objective argument, right? I think a lot of this gets lost in translation when you have two players who impacted the game greatly. The people who were watching them, who were impressionable at that time, maybe view that in sort of a more subjective, romanticized light. But we're trying to abstract away from that and really focus on who they were as players in a vacuum, pickup basketball almost.
In a team sport.
In which, winning a championship is your goal and individual goals are sort of secondary to that. And so just making sure we're on the same page.
Yeah. So, I mean, and I think it's I think that's kind of worth noting, especially at this point. So, I think up until age 24, the gap is shrinking, but I still think LeBron James, from birth until 24, is the better basketball player.
It would appear to be the case, yes.
So, jumping into Mike's age 25 season, which this was 88-89, he started all 81 of the games that he played, led the league in minutes for the second year in a row. He would go on to win his third scoring title in his career because he won the year before. This year he'd average 32.5 points per game. He'd average 8 rebounds a game, the most he'd ever average in his career. 8 assists, the most he'd ever average in his career. 2.9 steals. He would go on to shoot 53% from the field. He'd shoot 27% from three. One of the higher 3-point percentages that he shot from his career. He went on to shoot 85% from the line, and this was the year that the Bulls actually made it the furthest they ever made it in the playoffs. They would go on to beat the Cavs in the first round. Of course, he'd hit the shot over Craig Elo. I don't know. What Elo? They would go on to beat the Knicks in the semifinals in 6, and they would go on to lose to the Pistons yet again, but this time they lost to them in the Eastern Conference Finals in 6 games. This was Doug Collins' final year. In the regular season, they finished 6th in the East. They dropped from being 3rd the previous year, but they actually were able to they made it further in the playoffs. And Michael Jordan, at least his playoff successes were starting to come into fruition, and he was starting to become a playoff winner, but he was just the guy that couldn't make it to that absolute last step and win. And in 89, he ended up finishing second in the MVP voting. But of course, another season for the ages, as he would go on to make yet another All-Star appearance. This would be his 5th in his first 5 years in the league. I would say his regular season wasn't as great, but he became more of a team player and was able to get his team further in the playoffs. Yeah. That's where he was at this very point. He was at the very last step, but he couldn't make it.
Got it. Well, LeBron, at this point is very well established on the Cavaliers. Clear leader, clear, kind of drive on the team success. A lot of injuries to the team that year. Mo Williams goes down, a few other folks. He ends up playing point guard for a lot of that year. The Cavs had the best record in the league. Yet again, second year in a row. Mm-hmm. LeBron wins his MVP, almost averages 30 points a game, 50% shooting for the year. And then, they beat the Bulls in the first round of playoffs that year as a 1 seed, and then lose to the Celtics. But that was definitely, until this point, LeBron's worst series in the playoffs. He, just got, blown out in Game 5. Shot 20%, only scored 15 points. And that is sort of, the big exclamation point on LeBron's time first stint in Cleveland. And
did he win the MVP that year?
So he did win MVP that year. And the Cavs were a really good team. I think he just had one really bad game that series, Game 5. Game 6, he, put on another show, 27, 19, and 10, right? But had 9 turnovers and, again, had a terrible team. That didn't really help them too much, but
and they lost in the second round, right?
They lost in
the second round. So technically, Jordan's team made it further. They made it to the Eastern Conference Finals. One of the two won the MVP. That was LeBron's second, and Michael at this point has one MVP to his name.
MVP, yeah.
So I mean, as I threw this argument out earlier, but it's just whereas Michael Jordan had the Defensive Player of the Year on LeBron, but LeBron made it further in the playoffs. With this year, LeBron James was voted as the best player in all of basketball, and arguably a tougher NBA, and that's a different argument. But I don't know. I think naming one dude the best player in the NBA and one the MVP runner up.
Yeah. I mean, I think Jordan had a better season, that specific season. So I think that if we're just chalking this up as, tallies on each of the years, I think Jordan gets a tally here.
Yeah.
If we're talking cumulative, still LeBron's, clearly winning cumulatively, but Jordan is, clearly making some serious strides, and I think right now it's very much close.
Yeah, and even though LeBron did win his second MVP, Jordan, as the best player on his team, and Doug Collins' last year, was able to get the Bulls further in the playoffs than LeBron James was able to with the Cleveland Cavaliers. So Michael Jordan takes year 25.
Yeah,
takes it. So, jumping into age 26, this is Michael Jordan's 89-90. This is the last year that Michael Jordan was not a champion, on the record, officially not a champion. He started all 82 of his games. He led the league in scoring for the fourth year in a row, averaging 33.6 points per game, while averaging 6.9 rebounds, 6.3 assists, leading the league in steals for the second time in his career. He went on to shoot 53% from the field, 37% from three. And 3 attempts per game, which is the most, which was one of his better 3-point shooting seasons. He shot 84% from the field. And of course, in 89-90, Michael Jordan would make his 6th All-Star game in his 6th season. Just continuing to show why he's one of the best players in the league. He would finish 3rd in MVP voting. And the Chicago Bulls they would lose in Game 7. They lost in Game 6 in the Eastern Conference Finals to the Pistons in 89, but in 90 they lost in Game 7 to the Pistons in Phil Jackson's first year coaching. They finished 3rd in the East. But of course, this was Michael Jordan's very last year before he became an established champ, and I guess in the NBA voted him as the 3rd best player. And I mean, he was one game away, but at this stage, he was one game away from at least making it to the promised land.
Yeah. And at this time, LeBron, this was the decision. A lot of people didn't like that, and I think it was maybe not the best way to handle it. I think he's said stuff about that since then. But that was the year he moved to Miami. So now we're down in South Beach. Creating this new super team with Chris Bosh and Dwayne Wade. The Heat do not do well at the start of this season, right? They go 9-8 to start the year, and everybody treats sort of the Heat as villains. They're the bad guys. And then sort of as the season goes on, though, the team gets more comfortable with each other. LeBron sort of takes over that role as a leader, as sort of the guy that matters on the team. And ends up averaging 27, 8, and 7, shooting 51% from the field, and the Heat end up making it to the 2nd seed in the East after starting basically 500 for the first quarter-ish of games. So in that playoff run, he ended up facing the Celtics again, right? The team that he lost to the year before when he decided he wanted to leave Cleveland, and ended up beating them, scoring the last 10 points of the game-winning game, series-clinching game against the Celtics, making it to the conference finals, and then eventually the finals where they lost to the Mavericks, which I think for a lot of people looking back on it was LeBron's worst playoff series, especially on the game's biggest stage. They lost in 6 games. They were the favorite in that series. Dirk Nowitzki kind of went off, and LeBron struggled quite a bit. He only scored 18 points per game, which was about a 9-point drop from his regular season numbers, and overall did not perform that well. But I would say,
but he made it to the finals.
So I would say that season, if his options were to lose in the conference finals or make it to the finals and struggle, my perspective on that is he had the better season. His regular season numbers weren't quite as good as Jordan's, but I think that playing with 2 new superstars, trying to get accustomed to that, being in a new team, new coach, a very young coach, right, Eric Spoelstra, is much different than being with Scottie Pippen and Phil Jackson.
And of course, you have to share the role of being the alpha with Dwayne Wade, who's already there. So of course,
who's already a champion, who is very much used to being in charge of things. So him trying to get accustomed to sort of taking the torch from Dwayne Wade, so to speak, or letting it be passed to him, probably led to those numbers. So I personally believe this was a better season for LeBron.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you agree, but
I would chalk it up to LeBron. I mean, like, And how did he finish in the MVP voting that year? I think that was the year he finished runner-up to Derrick Rose, or did he win MVP that year?
So he did not win MVP that year. He finished third.
Okay, so they both finished third. So they both had basically an identical season. Jordan lost in Game 7 of the Eastern Conference Finals. LeBron lost in the finals. I give it to LeBron.
I think it's pretty clear. Yeah, I would.
I'd give it to LeBron. I mean, so Jordan has, what does he have? He has age 25, but LeBron has age 26.
Yeah.
And everything else that isn't 25. So, jumping into the age 27, now we start getting into when both players are championship, like when they're official champions. In Jordan's first year as a champion in 90-91, he went on to lead the league in scoring for the 5th year in a row. He averaged 31.5 points per game, 6 rebounds, 5.5 assists, 2.7 steals, of course. And he still hasn't had a season where he averaged less than 2 steals up until this point. He shot 53% from the field, of course, balling out like, of course, only Michael Jordan would. He would go on to win his second NBA MVP with 92% of the vote. I don't even know. He had everything left and right. He won his first championship. And in addition to winning the MVP, he went on to winning the Finals MVP too. Few players that have won the MVP and the Finals MVP in the same year. The Chicago Bulls this year, they swept the Knicks in the first round. They beat the 76ers in the second round. And this was after they got the best record in the East. I'll get back to that. But in their second year under Phil Jackson. They went on to sweep the Pistons, the very team that beat them the previous 3 years in the playoffs. They swept them in the Eastern Conference Finals, and they went on to beat the Los Angeles Lakers in 5. Noted Kareem Abdul-Jabbar wasn't there, but that's still the Los Angeles Lakers, a team that had won 5 championships throughout the 80s. Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen, Horace Grant, like we saw it in The Last Dance. That was the very first time Michael Jordan was officially a champion and can put his name among like Larry Bird and Magic Johnson and even his biggest rival Isaiah Thomas at the time. So I mean that was the year he officially became a champion when he was and this was his age 27 season.
Yep. And so like you mentioned, this is LeBron's first time becoming a champion as well. Second year with the Heat, you lose to the Mavericks 6 games the year before. You kind of want to, you realize that you're not kind of everything that you thought you were maybe, or that what you were doing before wasn't working. So he ends up going and working with Hakeem Olajuwon to kind of like change his game up a bit, ends up becoming more of a post player a little bit, shoots a lot higher field goal percentage, 53% now, averages 27, 8, and 6. With 2 steals a game, and they end up going to the playoffs, right? And then this year, LeBron ends up being the MVP of the regular season. In the playoffs, they end up coasting through the East, albeit without Chris Bosh this time. He ends up having an ab injury, and LeBron just goes off against the Pacers right after Chris Bosh goes out, smokes those guys, ends up going to conference finals against the Celtics. This was sort of like the pivotal, if you have to come up with a LeBron James moment up until this point, destroys the Celtics in Game 6 when they were, facing elimination, 45-15. And this was sort of like the career-defining, game for LeBron. They win Game 7, face the OKC Thunder with their, young big 3, Harden, Westbrook, Durant, end up, beating them in Game 5. Or Game 6. 5, yeah, it was a 5 game. They won 5.
It was a 5 game.
Yeah, they won in 5. So, he wins his first championship, unanimous Finals MVP, so averaging 29, 10, and 7. So here we are, playoffs, averages 30, 10, and 6. He absolutely, one of his best seasons. I think one of the best seasons by any player ever, really.
So, like, what I'm hearing is both players, basically identical seasons. How many players have won season MVP, final MVP in the same year, of course, while just
Probably 5.
And then just steamrolling through the same conference and then winning against one of the better teams that have ever played basketball together. Like, all three of those players won season MVPs on that team. I mean, I would make the argument that LeBron had a lot tougher competition in the playoffs that he played, but I'd make it a stalemate. Both players had for their eras. I think the added just difficulty and LeBron probably had a better team around him in the finals, but he played against harder teams.
He didn't have Chris Bosh at the time, right? So
In the finals, he did.
Oh, yeah, Chris Bosh.
In the finals, he did. But it's just like LeBron definitely had a harder road to the finals. But both teams ended up steamrolling through the East and winning the finals in 5. For their eras, I would say it's probably a stalemate leaning towards LeBron on just like basketball, just like the difficulty and just like the skill level of the overall NBA gets better over time. But I don't want to use that argument in this case, just talking about how they dominated their eras. As I think it's a toss-up. I'd lean it towards LeBron, but just to be as objective as possible.
So we'll scratch that one. We'll give them both a half of a point or something.
Just like give them even. Like,
so up to this point, LeBron's won every season except for this most recent one, age 27,
and then 25,
age 25,
and age 25 leans Jordan.
That one.
All right. So now these players are both champs, and as great as Michael Jordan had an amazing season, I'd probably say LeBron before I even get into this. But Michael Jordan this season, in his sixth year in a row, averaging over 30 points a game, leading the NBA in scoring, his sixth scoring title, completely insane. He averaged 36 and 6. He shot 50% from the field, starting all of the 80 games that he played. And of course, this season, the Chicago Bulls would end up with the best record in the NBA with 67 wins. They would end up sweeping the Heat in the first round. They beat the Knicks in 7. The Knicks almost beat them. They beat the Cavs in the conference finals, and they would end up beating Clyde the Glide in 6 in the NBA finals, where, of course, people were comparing Michael Jordan and Clyde Drexler, saying they were arguably the same player. And then Michael Jordan said, I took it personally, and then ended up helping the Chicago Bulls embarrass the Portland Trailblazers. But of course, an amazing performance from Michael Jordan. And I think, did we get to the Olympics yet? Because Michael Jordan went to the Olympics following this. Because I don't know if they were both the same age when they both went to the Olympics, but I know that in 1992, when Michael Jordan played for the Dream Team.
Was this his first time in the Olympics at this point?
This was his first time in the Olympics, because that's when they implemented the Dream Team. And then after winning the NBA Finals, and in 92 winning his third NBA MVP, this was probably the biggest Michael Jordan was at this point. He made basketball completely global. And I mean, dude was one of the few players to win a season MVP, NBA Finals, and to win a gold medal, all in the span of like a year. And I think LeBron probably won.
So that's interesting, right? So LeBron had up before that point in Jordan's career. LeBron had played in 3 Team USA teams, right?
Yeah.
He bronze in 2004, gold in 2008 in Beijing, and then gold again in 2012. So if we're looking for something to tip the scales in that year we called a tie for Jordan and LeBron, I think that might tip it over to LeBron. This was his first year kind of leading it. Kobe stepped back, let LeBron take it over, which kind of makes me think, if we're looking for a tiebreaker, winning gold as the team leader in the Olympics might be a good thing. I don't know if you agree with that, but that was just...
And which year was this? How old was LeBron this year?
So this was the year 27. This was the one we just did.
Oh, the one we just did. So I guess that year you probably just...
So instead of splitting it, I think maybe move that one over to LeBron.
Or I guess you could tack it on to the beginning of LeBron's 20, or because it's like... Because
it's both, right? Yeah,
because they both won. Though they both won the Olympics in roughly the same year, so I guess we can tack it on there because this is arguably both of their best individual seasons ever.
Yeah, I mean, if you're not considering sort of a different type of LeBron grade season more recently, but that season for LeBron was 30 points, 8 assists, a bunch of efficiency records from the field.
Yeah.
And he did their 27 game win streak, right? Third longest in league history. That year the Heat went 66-16, right? Similar to that Cavs team, best record in the league. And that year, right? That was the year Carmelo took that one vote in the MVP voting to keep LeBron from being unanimous. Nobody really knows why that happened.
Because he thought that the Knicks wouldn't make the playoffs without Carmelo Anthony. But please continue.
So he ended up averaging the 27, 8, and 7 on the season, shooting 57% from the field. That 30 and 8 was actually in the month of February, which was sort of the LeBron's. That was during that win streak. So apologies for screwing that one up. But then the finals or the playoffs come around. LeBron hits a buzzer beater against the Pacers that year. So this is his third buzzer beater of his career up to this point in the playoffs. Which is as many as Jordan had in his entire career, but we're gonna skip past that for a second. And they kind of coasted through the finals that year, and they met up with Spurs, right? And this is like the sort of a different type of career-defining moment, right? Going up against the dynasty in the San Antonio Spurs.
The very dynasty that ruined his first chance at winning the
NBA all the way back in 2007. And so he ends up kind of being basically destroying every game. He was the best player in every game, sort of unanimously. I don't think many people would have objected to that, so maybe not unanimously. But he ends up, Game 7, right? This is the game. Ray Allen hits that basically buzzer beater, right, to tie it.
After LeBron led that entire comeback.
Right, he had 16 points in that quarter, scored 37 points in that game. But Ray Allen hits the game winner of that game. That's the thing everyone's talking about. And so he wins Finals MVP yet again, averages 25, 11, 7, and 2.3 in the finals that year. So I don't know that.
I'd say it's I would say on paper it's probably a toss-up, but LeBron was one vote away from being the first ever unanimous MVP, and let's not forget how much people love Jordan. LeBron, I think it goes to LeBron. If you're gonna give them both the Olympic medal in that year, which I
think that's reasonable.
The Olympics comes every 4 years. If you're gonna tack it on, might as well give it to them at their best years. I still think it's LeBron. I don't think there's a better season that any basketball player has ever had than LeBron's 2012-2013 season, and that might come from bias, but I think LeBron takes this one. I still I think LeBron takes this one. His age 27, 28 season.
Yeah, so I think this brings up another point that I've heard quite a bit. Jordan never played in a Game 7 in the finals, right?
That's very true.
And LeBron barely eked out a victory in Game 7 of this series.
But Jordan played against the Portland Trail Blazers, whereas LeBron was playing against... And let's not forget how great Tony Parker, Manu Ginobili, and Tim Duncan were. Danny Green set a record for most threes in an NBA Finals series in that year. That's their fourth player.
And then who's their fifth player? Kawhi Leonard, who we haven't even started.
I didn't even Kawhi. So I forgot about Kawhi.
Their top 5
exactly.
players that series were all potentially. Danny Green's not gonna be Hall of Famer, but the other 4 were.
And the Spurs were actually favored to win that series, whereas the Bulls were overwhelmingly favored to beat the Trailblazers. I just think narrative-wise, just strength of schedule and just sheer dominance, and the fact that he's bigger, stronger, faster.
And I think now we're getting in right to the 2013, 2014.
We're getting to the point where we're picking hairs now between who had a better.
So 28. Who's 28?
I think I'd say 28 goes to LeBron.
Okay, so 20 goes to LeBron. So up until this point, we've got all LeBron, other than a split at age 27, a win for Jordan in 25.
And then Jordan took 25 when he won the when he went further in the playoffs than LeBron.
He went further, similar seasons.
Yeah. So in 1992-93. After starting in all the 78 games that he played, he went on to lead the league in scoring for his 7th year in a row. He went on to average 32.6 points. He led the league in steals for the 3rd and final time of his career. He also averaged 6 rebounds, 5.5 assists. And then this season, the Chicago Bulls in 92-93 went on to finish 2nd in the East. But of course, that didn't matter because they swept the Hawks. Who doesn't sweep the Hawks? They swept the Cavs in the 2nd round. They beat the Knicks in 6, and then they ended up beating Charles Barkley, who won the MVP that year. But they ended up beating the Suns in 6 games, securing the three-peat, 3-time champion, and then at the end of his 9th year in the NBA, Michael Jordan just retired from the game as arguably unarguably the best player to ever do it at least through 9 games at that point. He was the GOAT. They already gave him a statue in Chicago, and then he walked off in the sunset at that point as as a champion and quite possibly the best to ever do it. To add on to the fact that he was all NBA first team yet again. This is his 6th year in a row winning all defensive first team. But just the everything the list kind of goes on. And then that year he finished 3rd in MVP voting in the regular season, but they still went on to win the championship for the 3rd year. And Michael Jordan showed that he was still that dude that year.
Yeah. So kind of funny, little aside, I guess. LeBron this year. So this is his age 29 season, 2013-14 in Miami. Last year in Miami, as we know. This is the year that he's playing, Michael Jordan's Charlotte Bobcats, and dropped 61 points on them.
That's true. He did do that.
Right, and I think he gave some look. Yeah, I think he looked over at Jordan while he was dunking.
While he was dunking, like yes.
Yeah, that was that game. That was that year. He was mainly the only person consistent on that roster at that point. Everybody's injured. They had 20 different starting lineups that season. Dwayne Wade goes down, Chris Bosh goes down, amongst many, many others. He ends up averaging 27, 7, and 6 on 57% shooting again, right? Very efficient at this point. He gets to the second round against the Pacers, or the Nets, scores 49. Up to that point, that's his high in the playoffs. They win. They beat the Pacers in the conference finals. 4th straight finals appearance at this point. They are one of only 4 teams in NBA history to do this. LeBron, obviously, the driving force behind all 4. LeBron, this ends up missing the 4th quarter of Game 1 of this series, which, due to leg cramps, Spurs end up winning that game largely due to that. He shoots 64%, 35 points in Game 2. He tied the series, but then Spurs end up winning the next 3 games. Kawhi Leonard wins Finals MVP that year. Sort of the rise of Kawhi, and the Heat end up kind of after that going their separate ways. But LeBron in the Finals that year, 28, 8, and 2, 2 steals. It's obviously the driving force behind everything that they were doing, but unfortunately was not enough to deliver a title that season. So I think, that season it's a little bit easier to make the decision, but I think Jordan took that one.
Yeah, and even though and they both finished top 3 in MVP voting, but of course Jordan finished the 3-peat. I think that should be the end of that discussion. Jordan takes, what is this? Is this age 29? Mm-hmm. This is age 29. So I think it's easier to age 30. Michael Jordan was a baseball player for the Birmingham Barons, so...
Okay, so this is a little easier, right? Yeah, a little easier at this point, but we can still go through LeBron just to kind of illustrate his greatness. This is his first season back in Cleveland. They've got Kyrie there. The Cavs are just terrible, right, before LeBron comes back. LeBron comes back, though. They make the playoffs, get to the second round, beat the Bulls with another buzzer beater. So this is his 4th game winner in the playoffs.
I think it's also worth noting that when Michael Jordan did leave, the Chicago Bulls went from a 57-25 record to a 55-27 record. They lost 2 less games in the regular season. They finished 3rd instead of 2nd in the East. They swept the Cavs in the first round and lost to the Knicks in 7, who ended up going to the NBA Finals that year. So like Michael Jordan leaves and they're back they're almost in the Eastern Conference Finals. Whereas when LeBron left, what was the Cavs record when he left versus?
So when LeBron left the Cavs in 2010. I'm pulling up the record right now, year by year. So, why does it only give me? Hang on.
Let me see. I think. So Cleveland went from winning. Get this. They went from 61-21 to 19-63. That's 42.
Flipped it.
That's 42 games. There's 82 games in a season. That's more than half.
Okay, and then here's another interesting. Another interesting one. In 2013-14, LeBron's last year in Miami, right? They were 10th in the East with a 33-49 record. LeBron comes back. They jump to 53-29, first in the Eastern Conference. And get this, LeBron only played in 63 of those games, and they won nearly all of them. Yes, so that is that's very interesting. I'm glad you brought that up. They get to the the actual NBA finals that year, right? So this is his 5th straight finals at this point.
And then after Kevin Love got his arm ripped out of his socket by Kelly Olynyk.
So both Irving and Love at this point in the NBA finals are injured. So it is only LeBron versus what we now know as one of the best teams ever.
Don't disrespect my boy Dellavedova.
Warriors. Yes, he did have Delly. Delly was his second best player. Matthew Dellavedova. And LeBron, obviously he goes off. He was very much in consideration for Finals MVP that year, right? Like no Warrior player played particularly well. Andre Iguodala ended up winning it because of his defense on LeBron.
And holding him to 30 points a game.
36 points per game. 13 boards and 9 assists, right? So this is his first time, scratching at that triple-double average that we know he ends up getting eventually, which would have been, crazy if he had won Finals MVP without actually winning the championship. But what did the Bulls... So I think easy W for LeBron that year. Not really a question. This age 30. And then we go to the next year for the... for Jordan, he's still playing baseball.
So he's playing baseball, but then he eventually comes back to the NBA. He played 17 games, but he's still he was out here still Michael Jordan. He came back number 45. He dropped 55 points in Madison Square Garden. Like he was back. He averaged 27 points per game. In 39 minutes a game. So he was back playing full minutes, but he was still kind of in baseball shape. When he got to the playoffs, he got tired easily. He was getting kind of winded because of course baseball shape is a different type of shape. And then in that year they ended up finishing 5th in the East because the Bulls were kind of struggling. Then he got there, then they were the same Bulls again. And then they ended up beating the Hornets in the first round, but they lost to Shaquille O'Neal's Magic, which is Shaquille O'Neal. I mean, he's the only person that has beat Michael Jordan in the Chicago Bulls in the playoffs since Michael Jordan won a championship, which is something that Shaq doesn't get enough credit for. And Penny, and they had a great team as well. But Michael Jordan came back, still showed that he was that guy, but he didn't play a full season, and the Chicago Bulls just weren't as prepared for the moment as the Orlando Magic were. Yeah. And you could see that Jordan was kind of getting fatigued in those moments. Whereas LeBron was probably had arguably his best season that wasn't the 2012-13 season.
Yeah, no, and so this was the 73-win Warriors year. Arguably the best team in NBA history. I think a lot of people would say they were. That was the year actually that the Cavs fired David Blatt, the head coach of the Cleveland Cavaliers, halfway through the season, and Ty Lue comes in, and LeBron's basically adjusting to that, and they ended up winning the best record in the East, 57 wins. LeBron averages 25, 8, and 7, 52% from the field. They smoked everybody in the playoffs, got to the finals, only lost two games up to that point. They play the Warriors, 73-win team, right? They go down 3-1 right off the bat. And they got smoked, right? Like they were in terrible shape. But then LeBron just takes over the series, right? Like clearly far and away the best player in all 3 of the remaining games in that series. 40 back-to-back 41-point games 5 and 6. Draymond Green's out at that point, right? There's a whole big thing there. But then the block. That's this is his big defining moment. Wins Game 7, triple-double, averages 30, 11, and 9 with 2.5 blocks and 2.5 steals in the NBA Finals, and is the first player in league history to lead both teams on either side of the NBA Finals in all 5 statistical categories, which is super interesting.
Nothing that never happened before.
Right, and was again for the 3rd time in his career the unanimous Finals MVP. So we're now at this point where I think it's very clear yet again that LeBron kind of chalks up age 31 season. But
yeah, age 31 probably goes to LeBron after that.
And I think it's also worth kind of noting at this point, right? So both players, accolades wise, is age 31. They have the same number of titles. Mm-hmm. LeBron's been to more.
But LeBron lost in the finals more.
Yeah, that's true. But Jordan lost in the playoffs in general.
Yeah.
Just as much, right? Just didn't make it as far. So do you penalize the guy who gets 2nd place as opposed to the guy who gets 6th place? Is it better to get 6th place than 2nd place? Yeah, I guess it depends on how you look at it. I don't think I would.
Yeah.
But when you're running a race, you're not shooting to get either first or fifth or first or eighth or first or not even joining the race, right? You're shooting for first and if not for second.
Yeah.
And I think LeBron showed, the resilience, the ability to kind of get back and do that. And so I think, up to this point, LeBron has had, probably, not probably, I think LeBron's had a better career, right?
Yeah, and then that was the point where it's like, and that was the point, up until then, I think since then, there's nothing you could tell LeBron, and it's just like he was at that "you can't tell me nothing." That was his point of his career. It was like
reached that.
Everything past that was just extra.
It was gravy, right?
Same with Jordan after his 3-peat.
He was in consideration now for GOAT, right? Like
Yes.
This was the point where I think everyone was like, okay, he went back to Cleveland, he won this.
Like
thing.
Michael Jordan had 6 championships at that point, and LeBron entered the conversation with half the amount of championships. Yeah, so I mean, at age 31, chalk it up to LeBron, and let's not argue. And Michael Jordan's had some amazing, phenomenal seasons up until now. It's just, I mean, and we're about to get into the stage of the career where Michael might take a couple seasons from him. So jumping into his age 32 season, this is probably one of Mike's better seasons. In 95-96. In Michael Jordan's first full season back after coming back after playing for the Chicago White Sox AA team. He averaged 30.4 points per game. This is his first time leading the league in points since he got back. This is his 8th scoring title to date. And once again, his 8th time averaging 30 points per game. He also went on to average 6 rebounds, 4 assists. He started all 82 games in a season where the Chicago Bulls would finish with 72 wins, the most wins in NBA history up until that point. They only lost 10 games in an 82-game season. Phil Jackson would win Coach of the Year, the first time he'd ever win it. Jerry Krause won Executive of the Year. Tony Kukoc won Sixth Man of the Year. And let's not forget, this is the first year they got Dennis Rodman on the squad, who was originally on the Pistons, who kicked Jordan's behind from when the Pistons were dominating. And then, of course, Scottie Pippen, after being the guy in 94-95. This time, he and Michael Jordan. This is probably the best Scottie Pippen had been up until this point. They went on to sweep the Heat in the first round. They beat the Knicks They beat the Knicks in 5 in the second round. They swept the Magic, who beat them the previous year, because Jordan, he probably said, I took it personally, which we all know after seeing The Last Dance. If he takes it personally, like, you're going to lose the series. And then they went on to beat Gary Payton and the Seattle Supersonics, and they had a squad that year. They beat him in 6, and once again, like, Michael Jordan, and they probably won the most games in the regular season out of a team that won the NBA Finals. I say that because the Warriors won more and lost because of LeBron. You already mentioned that. But, of course, Michael Jordan inflicting his will on the NBA. He would go on to win his 4th NBA MVP up until that point. And he would win his 4th NBA Finals, showing that he was back. Like, he was gone momentarily, but it's not a new era. He's back, and that was the beginning of his new 3-peat in 96. Jordan was that dude.
And LeBron, this was a season for the Cavs. So this was his 3rd season back with the Cavs. At this point, he's got 4 NBA MVPs, 3 NBA Finals MVPs. And now he's playing sort of on this like weird Cavaliers team that's got Kyrie and Kevin Love. I mean, Kevin Love's injured half the time, but the rest of the team's kind of a bunch of weird put together things. And the Cavs had a ton of weird losses that year. LeBron describes this as like the strangest year of his career. And this was one of the first years that LeBron,
wait. How bad did he beat the Golden State Warriors in 2016?
What do you mean?
Who did they add the next year?
Yes. So this was after KD leaves the Oklahoma City Thunder. Arguably the second best player in the league at this point, other than LeBron, and hops over to the Warriors. 73-win team adds the second best player in the league, right? And now the Golden State Warriors have not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, but 5, maybe even more future Hall of Famers, right? In Kevin Durant, Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Draymond Green, and Andre Iguodala, right? And so they have 5 folks to the Cavaliers. For sure, 1, Kyrie's
Two. I mean,
maybe
after 2016, he'd probably
after the one final shot. I think that might be
he
his thing.
averaged 40 points a game for the. He almost averaged 40.
But the Hall of Fame is about more than a game, a
That's
series,
true.
right? Like,
that's true.
What has Kyrie done since then? Which makes me think there's a chance he doesn't make the Hall of Fame. And same with Kevin Love, right? He had a great time in Minnesota, played great for my Timberwolves. But at the same time,
Kyrie has some basketball left.
Kyrie does have, which makes me worried because I don't know what he's going to do with it. But that was the season LeBron ended up averaging career highs in rebounds, assists, and also turnovers. He
What were the
averaged
highs?
so 8.6 and 8.7. So basically, pretty close to the 9. So he averaged 26, 9 and 9 roughly, 8.6, 8.7, 4 turnovers per game. And in the first, so they coast through the playoffs, except for they were trailing the Pacers by 25 points at halftime in a tied series, and they ended up coming back to win after LeBron goes off in the second half, and that was the year also that LeBron passes Michael Jordan, right? So Michael Jordan's entire career in the playoffs, LeBron's passing him at age 32. So we we're talking about these guys as if they're the same age, but we're saying at the end of all of the years of Michael Jordan, LeBron has all the way up already at this point passed him in total points, which is interesting kind of because we're doing this in a weird order compared to like cumulative stats. But that season, right, they lose to the extraordinarily stacked Warriors team. Definitely, if the other Warriors team wasn't the best team in NBA history, this team was.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the first year that LeBron averages the triple-double in the finals. So he averages 34, 12, and 10, and they lose in 5 games. So I don't know. I mean, I think obviously Jordan winning the championship makes it kind of his.
He came back. He won the MVP that year, and of course the votes are kind of stacked more.
Yeah,
I think Russell Westbrook won the MVP that year. If not him, probably Harden. I'm not sure.
It wasn't.
It might have been because it wasn't Curry. It wasn't KD. It might have been.
It was Curry, I think.
In 2016 or 2017.
2017, yeah.
With KD there, I think it might have been. I think that was the first year that Russell Westbrook averaged a triple-double. But I'm not completely sure. But that's where they were at about their point. And I'd probably give it to Mike because he won the finals. And it's like LeBron, no one could have won that finals. But Michael Jordan came back and showed he was that dude. Won his 4th NBA finals and his 4th season MVP. So I mean, I'd give age 32 season to Michael Jordan.
It's
so
close.
Jumping in, it's close. It's closer than a lot of people would
want to
think.
make it out to be somebody who loses in 5 games.
Like LeBron did pass Michael Jordan playoff points.
Yeah.
And then Michael Jordan, like that was the one stat where he was extraordinarily just dominant at, and LeBron just passed him.
Yeah.
But still jumping to age 33 season in 96-97. This is the first time Jordan led the league in scoring, but didn't score 30 points. He averaged 29.6. He went on to average 5.9 rebounds, over 4 assists, almost 2 steals a game. He started all 82 games in a season where the Chicago Bulls would end up finishing first in the East with 69 wins instead of 72. They ended up beating the Bullets. That's how long ago this was. They swept the Bullets in the first round. They beat the Hawks in 5. They beat the Heat in 5. They beat the Heat so many times in the playoffs, Michael Jordan got his jersey retired there. And then they ended up beating the Jazz the first time, and then Michael Jordan won his 5th career Finals MVP at that point. And of course, in 97, Michael Jordan was still first team All-NBA, and first team All-NBA defense. That was the 8th time he'd won All-NBA defense, and this was the 9th time he was a first team All-NBA. Just, of course, Michael Jordan doing his thing. And this year in 97, he'd finished 2nd in MVP voting. And I think the winner would end up being Karl Malone, who I think was the oldest MVP ever in NBA history until LeBron probably wins it next year.
Yeah, so for LeBron, this was Kyrie Irving saying, fuck you, I want to play with you. Oops, sorry.
You're good, you're
bleep that guy out. LeBron averages 28, 9, 9, and 4 that year. Career high in assists. they go back to the finals, right, without anybody, right? Mm-hmm. Kevin Love's there, but yeah, Kevin Love's not Kevin Love anymore. And they play the Warriors again. And this was a year where LeBron does his, J.R. Smith, what are you doing thing, right? He scores 50.
How did LeBron go through his numbers in the regular season? I'll just say it for the show.
In the regular season?
Yeah.
Well, I was saying, yeah.
In 2017-18, how did he do in the regular season?
So in the regular season, 28, 9, 9.
9 and 9.
Yes.
9 rebounds and 9 assists, and he's 6'9".
Yes, that's correct. He is 6 foot. Yes, crazy man.
And then just what did he do each round of the playoffs?
So this was his 5th game winner against the Pacers in the playoffs. And then he hits another one against the Raptors.
We watched that
down
one.
the baseline. We watched that one in Myrtle Beach.
We watched it.
Yes, we did watch that one. That was a great game. We watched both of them, right? We watched Pacers.
We watched the Pacers for L-Doc. That's right.
Yeah. That this was the year that they basically swept their way through the playoffs. And LeBron, without Kyrie, right, all by himself basically, and scores 51 first game of the finals. A dumb mistake. By one of the players, including LeBron. LeBron made some dumb decisions.
And George Hill did miss the free throw.
George Hill missed the free throw. LeBron didn't call timeout. He had a timeout left. Why didn't he call timeout? Nobody knows. He probably just wasn't thinking as clearly as he should have been. And JR notably dribbles out, and LeBron freaks out at him. And that's sort of the end of the series. I think LeBron breaks his hand, punching a wall after that game, at least is reported. And so the game's basically done. But James ended up averaging 34, 9, and 10 in the finals that year.
Yeah, and this is the one time I'm probably going to go against my criteria for the other seasons. I think this season goes to LeBron hands down. I mean, if we're talking about individual the Cavaliers shouldn't have made it past the Pacers that year.
Yeah.
And they made it to the finals with that team. And of course, Kyrie left and Kevin Love was hurt. And I'm not going to dismiss Tristan Thompson and J.R. Smith, but LeBron James was the best player in basketball by far. It was a crime he didn't win MVP that year. I think he lost to James Harden that year. And I even though Michael Jordan did win his 5th, and I'll give him all the credit in the world, great season. This is the one time LeBron James got his team to the finals, whereas I don't think any other player in NBA history with that roster would have done it. And this is the one time, I guess, you can, if there's gonna be if you're gonna shout bias, I guess. But I watched LeBron, and LeBron's had some phenomenal seasons. I would even say that season he played better than he did on this Lakers season, and he had an amazing Lakers season.
Interesting. Okay.
I'd give LeBron, what is this, the age 33 season?
Yeah, I think we're age 33.
Yeah. So then. Now we're getting to the very end. We're getting roughly to the end of it. And Michael Jordan's age 34 season, in his final season of the three-peat, which was the actual last dance. He started all 82 games of the season. He led the league in scoring for the 9th time in his career. He averaged 28.7 points. He went on to average, 5 rebounds, 3.5 assists, 1.7 steals per game. This year, the Chicago Bulls would finish the best record in the East yet again with a 62-20 record. And if you watch The Last Dance, you know that they swept the Nets in the first round. They beat the Hornets in 5. Then they beat the Pacers with Reggie Miller in 7. One of the few series where Michael Jordan goes to 7 games. But then they would end up beating the Jazz in 6 for the second straight year. Michael Jordan hits probably the biggest shot in his entire career, the shot that immortalized him as 6 for 6, that dude that never even went to game 7, and he was the best player on every single team, won the finals MVP in every single time that he made it. It's just I don't know how much better you can get than Michael Jordan's age 34 season, just to end a phenomenal career where he even took a year and a half off, came back, won a second three-peat. Not many players have won 1 three-peat. He had 2 three-peats, and just rode off into the sunset before coming back to the Wizards. And that kind of concludes at least the peak, because he came back for the Wizards, but we'll get back to that. But
LeBron. I think this is the most clear Michael Jordan season.
Yeah.
So this is the year LeBron goes to the Lakers, right? He leaves the Cavs after that abysmal performance from his teammates in the finals the year before. He, leaves sort of just because it's like, a better place to be. I think he wants to try to build something completely from scratch himself. In the Los Angeles Lakers, Magic Johnson's there, kind of coaxes him along, but it's also LA, right? If you're a star in LA, there's not really anywhere better to be. If you like the lights, and LeBron certainly likes the lights.
And he brought Showtime back.
Yeah, and he did, and along with Lonzo and the rest of those folks who are all sort of showmen in their own right, and they did, they killed it, right? They were very good right away. They're
like the third or fourth best team in the West.
Yeah, and they weren't, perfect by any means. They were, figuring it out, but they ended up blowing out the Warriors Christmas Day game that year. But that is the game LeBron injures his groin and ends up being out for about, it felt like a minor injury at the time, but it ended up being, sort of a bigger thing, and he ended up missing 17 games that season. The Lakers absolutely, falling apart without him, falling out of playoff contention from second or third in the West to not even in the playoffs. He comes back and they really don't recover. There's trade rumors. Anthony Davis, is he coming? Is he not coming? Nobody's trying anymore. Everybody basically gives up on the team, and LeBron misses the playoffs. First time since his second year in the league that happens, and I think because of that, he made 8 finals before this, right? Up to this point, 8 finals straight, and then fails to make the playoffs. I don't think there's really a question. He makes All-NBA third team, his first time making All-NBA third team, right after making All-NBA first team for 10 years in a row plus. So yeah, I think we chalk that one up to Jordan and move on to LeBron's. I think personally, LeBron's best season, coolest season, most exciting season, most impressive season.
But before we get, I guess, like, Jordan played 38-39 in Washington. He made the All-Star game both those years because he is Michael Jordan. Yeah.
No, 38. LeBron's not 38.
No, but I'm saying, like, Jordan, let's chalk up Jordan's last 2 years and compare him to LeBron's current year just so it fits in. Just so it all kind of like fits in together. It's like his last 2 years, the last hurrah. He averaged 22.9 points in the 02 season,
we'll
and he averaged 20
this
points.
Then.
No, but it's fine. We don't have to redo it, but it's just because he skipped 3 years
or whatever.
Exactly. But I'm saying, like, I think once we pass this season in LeBron, it's like it's great, extra. Right? Like LeBron. Like, once we get past this, like, LeBron just has history that Jordan just doesn't have anything for. Like, this is like.
All right, fair enough.
So it's like we compare, like, we can put Jordan's last 2 years next to LeBron's most recent year, and I think that's where the conversation ends. And everything additionally, that's just points for LeBron.
Yeah.
But how did LeBron do in this season this year?
So right, we were in a sort of weird year. Right, we're still in it. Hopefully, kind of moving out of it.
Yeah.
This is November 13th, almost November 14th, in a year that since sort of January has been like marred by terrible event after terrible event. David Stern passing, Kobe Bryant passing, COVID hits, and sort of the world goes to hell. We have a current president who's not really equipped to doing any of this stuff. Makes it much, much worse. The NBA cancels their season first before anybody else did anything, and they figure out how to put together this bubble, right? And that is sort of what happens. And in July, after the season kind of resumes in Orlando, you have the entire NBA that's still in the playoffs or in contention for the playoffs down there with nothing else. They can't leave. They can't bring anybody else in. And according to everybody in there, it's just terrible. It's the worst environment to play in. People are going crazy. A lot of people at the start were saying there's going to be an asterisk next to this playoffs just because of the nature of not having fans, not having away environments. But I think a lot of the people who were in that environment said this was the toughest playoffs that anybody had ever played in. And so that season for LeBron, he ended up being the leader in assists. Right, he averaged 10.2 assists in his age. What was this, 35 season?
35 season.
Does very, very, very well for himself and for the Lakers. I remember them, right at the end of that season, right before COVID hit, when they beat the Bucks and then they beat the Clippers. or the other way around, back to back, were the other two sort of contenders that season.
Yeah.
And that was sort of like the climax of sort of the regular season. And then we get into the playoffs. Lakers knock off the Trailblazers first. They lose game one.
They lost the first game.
Lost the first game
because the Trailblazers played they played a play-in game, so they had a little.
So they've been warmed up. Lakers been out for a little bit. Then they played the Rockets, winning 5 there. Then they played the Nuggets, winning 5 there as well. And then they move to the NBA Finals, where they play the East number 5 seed, LeBron's former Miami Heat. LeBron absolutely cruises away with that, with Anthony Davis on his team, who had just been added that year via massive trade, and they win, right? And it was a fairly fun finals to watch. I thought so, but I think it was very clear the entire time who the winner was going to be. I don't think it was very much inevitable.
One of the few times that LeBron's favored in the finals.
Yeah, is what I think. Probably his 5th time being favored.
Probably 4th.
4th time being favored.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think I've seen that stat. We could pull that up, but
of course, but fourth NBA title, 4th Finals MVP.
Really, all around. He leads the league in assists at age 35. Second oldest player ever, other than Steve Nash. Third player to win Finals MVP, or first player to win Finals MVP with 3 different franchises, right?
Yeah, who's done that exactly?
And he's actually only one of 4 players to win a title with 3 different franchises. One of the other 4 being Danny Green, who was his teammate. This year with the Spurs and the Raptors were the other 2 that he won with. And then we didn't even talk about some of the Olympics. So that's kind of where we are now, right? So now looking forward, LeBron is favored to win the title next year. Maybe he wins it, maybe he doesn't. Maybe it's as terrible and he retires. But I have a feeling that it's going to be a more exciting journey for him than it was for Jordan at the end of his career.
So let's chalk this up. Let's look back, right? 17. Jordan is a high school senior. LeBron's a high school junior. It goes LeBron. Next year, LeBron is the best high school senior in the country, whereas Jordan's a freshman at UNC. That goes LeBron. The next year, LeBron is the rookie of the year. Jordan's in his sophomore year of college. That goes LeBron. The next year, LeBron in his second year in the NBA is a second-team All-NBA player and arguably a top 10 player in the NBA, whereas Jordan was the number 3 pick in the 84 draft. That goes LeBron. Age 21, 22, 23, 24, LeBron. 25, Michael Jordan. 26 goes back to LeBron. 27, because they both won their first championship and they both won the season MVP and finals MVP. We call it a draw. That's the draw. 20, what was it? We gave 27, we gave 28 to LeBron, because LeBron, I'd still say LeBron had the best individual season that anyone ever played. 29 we gave to Jordan. Jordan finished the three-peat. Jordan retired, but LeBron he brought his team back to the finals. So LeBron takes age 30. Age 31, Jordan still came back, but LeBron probably had the best finals performance he probably has ever had.
At least up to that point.
At least the best winning finals performance he's had up until that point. Age 32 we gave to Jordan, because Jordan started the three-peat again. We gave 33 to LeBron, because LeBron had 2018. Even though Jordan won, LeBron still had an incredible year.
Terrible team, but great individual performance. And I think really the best individual performance that you could ask from somebody, especially of his that team.
So we gave 34 to Jordan, because Jordan finished the three-peat, and 35 to LeBron, because LeBron helped the Lakers win this year. And then just looking at them side by side, looking at everything Michael Jordan has won, just starting off with high school, I guess. He was a McDonald's All-American. He was the ACC Rookie of the Year, 2-time first-team All-ACC. He was the ACC Player of the Year his junior year in college. He was a 2-time consensus first-team All-American. He was named, or in addition to being an NCAA champion, which LeBron couldn't because he didn't go to college, Michael Jordan is a 6-time champion. He has 2 three-peats, Every single time he won the championship, he won the MVP. He's won 5 regular season MVPs, 4 of which in seasons that he's won the championship. He's won 14, or he's been named an All-Star in 14 seasons, which is coincidentally every single year he's played in the league. He's a 3-time NBA All-Star Game MVP. He's made the All-NBA first team 10 times. He's made the All-NBA second team once in 1985, which is his rookie year. He was an NBA Defensive Player of the Year once. He made the first team All Defensive Team 9 times, which is almost a decade. Well, yeah. And then in addition to being the Rookie of the Year, he was a 10-time scoring champion, a 3-time steals leader, and a 2-time slam dunk contest winner. Not to mention, quite possibly one of the greatest just marketers or just athletes off the court in terms of just earning billions of dollars just off of his name, off of his game, off of his logo. Mm-hmm. One of the greatest, and when he retired, the greatest basketball player to ever do it.
Yeah. Yep. And LeBron, has tons of amazing awards to his name as well. I mean, kind of the coolest one that sums up sort of like the category of non-specific to basketball awards is the AP Athlete of the Decade award. I think, obviously one person in over a 10-year period is winning that, and it's pretty cool that he was the one out of Tom Brady, out of Usain Bolt, etc., who won that in the 2010s after he went to 9 finals, or 8 finals in those 10 years. Mm-hmm. In high school, he was the national champion his senior year. He was, 2-time National Player of the Year, junior and senior year, like as you mentioned earlier, first player to ever do it as a junior. 3-time Mr. Basketball in Ohio. McDonald's National Player of the Year. Jordan Brand MVP, right? Jordan, LeBron in 2003. But then we get into sort of evolved LeBron. Wins 2 gold medals, a bronze medal. Wins a bunch of FIBA championships, male athlete of the year in basketball, and then we get into the NBA where he's now won 4 finals MVPs, 4 NBA finals, 4 NBA MVPs, 16 All-Star appearances, 3 All-Star Game MVPs, which is kind of irrelevant but still interesting, and then is All-NBA first team 13 times. And got a couple second teams and a third
I think
team.
Is he tied or is he second with most first team appearances all time? I think he's most. I think if he's not tied, he's definitely number 1. Yeah. But a crazy longevity stat. But continue.
And so LeBron has the most total All NBAs at 16 with the 2 second place and the third places. But he has the most all-time also for first teams with 2 more than Kobe and Karl Malone, who have both had 11. And so, he also was 6-time All-Defense, NBA Rookie of the Year, first team rookie, scoring leader in 2008, assist leader in 2020, which is wild, 12 years apart, and led the league in minutes, which was another interesting 3 times, which was an interesting fact. But both these guys stack up very, very much against each other. It's a lot of fun to talk about these guys. We've been talking about this for 2 hours almost now, and we could keep going. But I think it's very interesting, and I think if we were to do a subsequent episode on this, I think we would maybe focus a little bit more on sort of the macro level arguments, difficulty of era, clutch, difficulty of competition in the playoffs specifically, in the finals specifically, the efficiency of the players, their impact on teammates, all these sorts of things.
Exactly.
But I think this approach was very interesting, and I think a very useful one when you want to try to stack these folks up kind of as they went, because they had very different paths to getting to where they went. Right, LeBron came from high school; he was an all-star in high school or rock star in high school. Went straight to the NBA, played for 4 different sections of teams in his career. Right, Cavs twice, but really it was 2 different teams. Whereas Jordan was, kind of your typical basketball player. Went high school to a couple years of college, won some championships there, won a championship there, and then obviously had a great NBA career, but also retired a couple times in the middle there. And so I think this is a good way to kind of let us stack up all those oddities.
And let's not mention these are two players that are finished, at least as of right now, they're two of the top 5 all-time scoring players in NBA history. And LeBron is still going, and he's very well on pace to at least get 40,000 points, 10,000 rebounds, and 10,000 assists. Whereas, I mean, Michael Jordan didn't play that many basketball games. So it's just they have two completely different careers, and it's interesting to look at it in this lens because there's obviously, like, until someone gets a time machine and puts them in the same court, this is probably, I think, probably the most objective way of just, of putting two players side by side to get a good understanding of who is truly more dominant within their own era. Because you can always argue era versus era of all time, but you never know.
Well, what's the point of that? I mean, because I do think it's interesting looking at, physically how much, better players are now versus then, and I think it's, pointless to try to argue that, because of that one player might be better than the other, because the way that people were brought up back then versus now, the way, what people are taught to do, the fact that the NBA changed from, sort of big boy bashing in the paint to 3 points, everything when LeBron was playing was, is another crazy thing, right? There's so many little things you can argue for both, but I think looking at it year by year is a way to kind of, abstract away from that, kind of focus in on one specific thing that is, attributable to both of them, which is how good were you in your given time at this given age, which I think was fun to look at.
Yeah, thank you, Luke, for coming. I appreciate you for making time in your incredibly busy schedule just to come and add and brighten up the show. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. And once again, it is Friday, November 13th, 2020. Out here in this quarantine, I'm James Sims. Thanks for listening to all 1 hour and 30 minutes of this piece. I hope all is well. And once again, peace out. I'll catch you on the next one.